All right, so today we're going to dive into some crypto mining updates. I think this will give you guys a little bit more of an understanding what's happening in the mining sector overall of blockchain and some of the players out there, many of which you probably recognize. One will be a guest on today's show. You're going to love it. Make sure and stick around. My name is Paul Barrow. Welcome back into Tech Path. Joining me today, of course, is Ms. Sue Ennis coming in from Hut8 Mining. Great to have you guys.
Hi, guys. Thrilled to be here today. Lots going on and excited to get into what's going into the AI space and BlackRock and everything. So, yeah, let's get into it.
It's going to be good. So, Sue, first of all, I know you guys are in the middle of a merger, can't really talk about it too much, but kind of give us an update just with Hut8 in general that you can speak of.
Yeah, so we are actually slated to close our merger with a large privately traded miner out of the US called US Bitcoin Corp on Thursday. That's when we've targeted to close this deal. Effectively, post-close, we will be managing a little bit north of 1 gigawatt of total hash rate and power under management. We're going to have hosting. We're going to continue to have HPC in applications like AI in some of our data centers, and a little over 9,000 Bitcoin on our balance sheet. So we're really excited about this being a totally new company moving forward.
So lots happening in the mining space. You look at Hashrate, obviously on the front page of a lot of people, both from an investment side of things, but also looking out toward the halving and how that is going to play out from a miner standpoint. I want to hit on a couple of news items here with you, just to get your kind of opinion. This was from Bitcoin News talking about, the potential speculation around ETFs like BlackRock that may be front-loading Bitcoin through miners instead of traditional markets. So when you look at something like that and exposure to a lot of these institutional capital entities and where Bitcoin is right now, it continues to fly. I think it just clipped 38,000 today. What do you look at in terms of how this may affect Bitcoin in general, not just the price, but just the framework around investing in Bitcoin as a whole?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the spot Bitcoin ETF, that is incredibly bullish for the price of Bitcoin, just because the nature of how spot products are designed is you need to have one-to-one backing. So share of ETF per Bitcoin. So that's incredibly bullish for the price of Bitcoin, because if all these spot ETFs are approved, we're going to see, the BlackRocks, the Invescos, the Wisdom,
Right.
the Valkyries of the world are going to have to be buying Bitcoin to actually create those products. And then in terms of just general demand for the space and different equities in the space, I think what we've seen certainly in the past couple of years, in the past couple of bull markets, even still a little bit in the bear market, is institutions looking to miner equities as a means for getting exposure to Bitcoin price action. Because a lot of the miners, for example, like Hut8, like Raya, and like Marathon, we have a pretty high correlation to the price of Bitcoin. So for example, Hut's beta to Bitcoin is about 1.2, which means we usually go a little bit, about 20% extra in whatever direction Bitcoin is trading. And so a lot of institutions do like that in terms of being able to still get exposure to the Bitcoin asset class without having to actually buy a Bitcoin, custody a Bitcoin. We've got quite a bit of liquidity in our stock, so it's easy to get in and out. And then I think just in general, it's really interesting to see where institutions are playing and how, back to what I was saying about sort of the beta of miner equities relative to Bitcoin. So if you look at price action year to date, miners on a whole are up 151% versus Bitcoin's only up 126%. And then if you look at the Nasdaq's up, I think, like 96% versus, again, a miner like Hut is up 127%. So I do think some of the institutions that are sort of circling the story, circling this asset class, are looking and noticing the different ways that they can still get exposure, again, without actually having to buy a Bitcoin directly.
So, okay, so what do you make of, obviously, the hash rate surge? So we've had that really since around October. If you look at the rise that we've seen in that period of time in just historical hash rate versus, to the ratio, Bitcoin is potentially on maybe on a track here to really start to see some price movement beyond what we've already seen in general. But with that being the case, the idea behind this, especially from institutions, let's just kind of hypothecate here that we're going to get past the ETF and it happens. Yeah. Some people might look at this, okay, this could be kind of a precursor to a soft landing. We're past, we get an ETF happening. What kind of impact do you feel that would have on the miners in general? Because there's going to be a lot more demand here, obviously, for Bitcoin in general.
For sure. And definitely there's been some sort of rhetoric around, will this decrease demand for the miners if a spot ETF is approved? I don't think it's going to, because number one, a lot of the miners, in particular, like Hut8, like the BitDeers, like the Riots of the world, were very differentiated. So you're not just getting a play on Bitcoin, you're also getting effectively a call option on the upside of the high performance computing space, the demand for AI, next gen data centers. Uh, on top of Hut8 is now also going to have a line of business called managed services, which is sort of like the CBRE JLL of energy infrastructure management. So I do think that institutions are still going to want to play on the mining equity side, just because again, it's a play on Bitcoin, but also a call option on other sort of high growth areas. And yeah, in general, I think all of this is incredibly bullish, especially as we're going into the halving. It's looking
Right.
like a lot of pundits are saying interest rates are going to come back down, which means within the next couple quarters, which means risk on appetite should come back in the market, which all of these are very bullish factors for Bitcoin and Bitcoin adoption.
Well, we may already be seeing kind of the pre-market indicators to that. Obviously, a lot of the key players, I feel, are already making moves in. And with that being the case, and you look at, all right, we're past the ETF. The idea is that the market might be in full swing bend, or at least in a correction mode, where we start seeing some action in a positive way around maybe some bullish trends. The other thing that I think is going to continue to play into this is the whole idea around renewables, ESG, kind of compatibility. A lot of investors now are going to look at, projects and companies that are really focused on that. This was an article right here, Bitcoin mining as a tool for grid stability and renewable energy integration. Obviously, you guys are very involved in this. I was a couple of points I wanted to highlight in this article. There was a working paper authored by some Bitcoin advocates, energy experts, countering claims obviously made by the anti-crypto politicians that we fight in DC all the time about contributing to environmental problems, argues that Bitcoin mining can actually serve as a valuable tool for clean energy integration and grid stability. I know you guys kind of lead the way around renewables and a lot of innovation in this area. What do you see over the next couple of years, especially with Hut8, but maybe broader from an industry standpoint to really focus in on this?
So I think one of the most exciting things about the Bitcoin industry moving forward, in particular Bitcoin mining, is that the data now shows that it is one of the most measurable, fast acting, far reaching climate technologies that we've potentially ever seen. So if you look at how miners are, let's just look at renewable grids. So one of the problems with renewable grids is that renewable energy is incredibly intermittent, and grids at all time must be balanced in order to be efficient. And this is where miners are an incredible complement to the grid, because it is very easy for a miner to power up and power down given where the grid load is at. Now, how that's traditionally been, how renewable grids have traditionally been complemented is by, natural gas plants, smelting plants, and it's a lot more difficult to power up and power down. Let's say, for example, the smelting plant within the span of 10 to 15 minutes, which is sometimes when grid congestion can happen. On a smelting plant, for example, that's 4.5 hours on either side to power up and power down, and it can only be left on for so long. So Bitcoin miners really are actually a partner in the transition to renewable energy, because we are designed to co-locate almost anywhere where there's cheap power. We don't need to be close to pipelines. We don't need to be close to populations. And again, the flexibility of Bitcoin mining's load is really an incredible asset to some of these renewable grid operators, and we're seeing a tremendous amount of success with it in Texas and the ERCOT grid. Brad Jones actually came out, who I believe is the CEO of the ERCOT grid, or head of the ERCOT grid. He actually came out and said that Bitcoin miners are an incredible asset and benefit to grid stabilization. And so that's one piece of how Bitcoin miners are a real partner in the transition to renewable energy. But I also think if you look at how Bitcoin miners are a solution to methane mitigation. So methane is one of the it's one of the most pollutive gases that exist right now in the industry. And the largest percentage of methane emissions actually come from landfills. And so the ability to have, again, a technology like a miner come into a landfill and capture some of that methane that instead is being flared into the atmosphere, capture that methane and reroute it towards powering Bitcoin mining is incredibly meaningful in terms of mitigating methane emissions, in terms of empowering communities that are placed beside these landfills and suffering from methane inhalation. There's over 1 million premature deaths that happen every year because of methane exposure. So this is why I think Bitcoin's mining in particular's killer app is the way that it can help some of our transition to renewable energy initiatives. And I also just really quickly, I have some really fun stats for you guys. So over the past 4 years, the Bitcoin industry is the only industry in the world that has decoupled emissions growth from user and network growth. So over the past 4 years, hash rate has gone up 475%. The price of Bitcoin has gone up 163%. Total users have gone up 209%. And emissions of the total network have actually gone down by 9.4%. And that's partially because of the greater mix of renewables powering the network and greater machine efficiency. So again, I think this is the killer app of Bitcoin mining technology. So yes, it's largely an education process.
Well, I think it's coming. I think it's just a matter of time before we start to see this. And much like, tech that's starting to, shift into the space, lawmakers are getting their heads around this. Obviously, many companies already kind of go in this direction. It brings me to my next topic, and that is AI and the use case of decentralized compute. Part of this is going to flow into the idea of miners that are flowing and understand this industry. I know you guys do a lot of alternative compute power, and it's probably one of your biggest business models. I want to play a couple of clips for you. These happened at Breakpoint, but let's go to this one first.
Compute requirements for AI apps are doubling every 3.4 months. That's 10x every 18 months. Training a model has increased in cost by 31 times per year over the last decade. And while training as a model is expensive, running it is even worse. This is going to be a $1 trillion market. The total demand for GPUs is around 20 to 25 exaflops, while the supply is only 10. It often takes up to weeks to deploy on AWS, GCP, or Azure. The average cost of running ChatGPT is $700,000 per day. These data centers, on average, operate at 12 to 18% utilization.
All right, so as you can see, big numbers in terms of AI, and it's very early, in terms of not only the capacity, but also the capabilities within that. You look at the opportunities here, especially from a miner like you guys, and you look at the GPU scale, the capacity, the likelihood of seeing decentralized compute power really rise to, I think, the front of technology. Where do you guys see this going for what you're doing?
Yeah, so I think the ability to stand up infrastructure, to understand the infrastructure, and to have access to power, given the growing demand in nascent compute, is really going to be the competitive edge that any miner who says they're supporting this industry has. So even if we back up and look at what's changed this year, at the beginning of 2023, there was something like 1.2 gigawatts of data center space that was signed in 90 days, which is the equivalent of powering 876,000 households. And that was unprecedented demand that was being signed by some of these hyperscaler data centers. But again, I think there's a tremendous amount of demand. There's not enough power. And so any operator that understands, number one, obviously how these chips differ from, let's say, a traditional mining chip, which is certainly where Hut8, we definitely have expertise in that area. Our CEO used to run data transformation projects for BlackBerry and IBM. So any miner that understands the industry, the infrastructure, has access to the power that is needed in order to power this infrastructure, and also relationships across the chip supply chain. So you see a lot of miners who are coming out saying, we're getting into AI mining or AI compute and whatnot. But the question is, do you have access to the H100s? Do you have access to the A100s? So having those relationships across the supply chain as well are super important. So US Bitcoin Corp, who we are merging with and hopefully closing on Thursday, They actually placed an order for 40 million worth of AI GPUs, which is really exciting. And one of the things that our chief strategy officer, Mike Ho, he's one of the co-founders of US Bitcoin Corp. He's going to be chief strategy officer and head of our sort of AI strategy in a post-merger world. One of the things he spent time on for the past 10 months is building those relationships across the supply chain. So again, yeah, I certainly think any miner who has those strengths will be able to stand up infrastructure faster and more efficiently than, let's say, a traditional hyperscaler would.
I want to play. I agree with you in the sense that this is what it's going to take to kind of leap to this next level. I want to play a couple of clips. These are back to back. I'm going to go to this first one that is getting into the mining stats. Listen in.
We're up to 90% cheaper than the cloud. You simply need to install some software, and from there, track your performance and claim your rewards. You can make up to 15 times more than mining. You can increase your utilization rates to 100%. You may have heard of other protocols that are aggregating GPUs. So what makes IONET different? And other aggregators can't cluster, but IONET can. In fact, that's what we're building, the Airbnb for GPU clusters. We're doing the clustering for render, and we have a wait list of over 100,000 GPUs that want to get on the network. We're going to get 1 million GPUs to build the world's largest AI compute cloud.
All right, so I'm really intrigued in this, in the sense of, for us to really scale AI, we're going to see decentralized compute, I think, really become a thing. I want to jump to this next clip before we go, and then I want to get your answers. But this is on the platform. Listen in.
IONET is powering BC8's models end to end, from training to inference. Click on this button, deploy cluster. Later on, we also have more integrations in our pipeline, including Unreal and Unity for gaming applications and to power the metaverse. You just select a cluster type that fits your model needs, general workloads, training, or inference. If sustainability is important for you, you can go ahead and select for green GPUs that are fully powered by sustainable forms of energy. And again, you only see a handful of options now, but with our full platform, you'll see from Apple M2 Ultra's powerful neural engines to high-end RTX series, and finally, all the way up to NVIDIA A100s and H100s. Click deploy, and your cluster will be ready for you, all within just 90 seconds.
All right, so pretty much kind of on-demand cloud compute, pretty cool. I see a partnership brewing here.
Yeah, I mean, again, we have a ton of growth on the horizon and potential, and I literally wrote down to follow up with my head of sales to make sure that he's chatting with io.net.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean, I think, again, operators who are able to be agile and nimble and move fast have the benefit here versus, again, a traditional hyperscaler doesn't have that ability to be agile and meet this type of demand the way that some of the smaller providers, or again, like I said, decentralized cloud computing providers or operators like Hut8 have in this nascent market.
No doubt. If you look at their Explorer, this kind of goes into the total, to compare, if you look at what IONET's deployed right now in total GPUs, render network here, obviously Filecoin, all of this all flowing into, and you can kind of see some of the GPU lists here that's available. And it goes into the cluster deployment, the network map, which is pretty dense. If you kind of scan out here a little bit, it's got some fairly significant exposure right now. And this is still very early. With all of that, and I love the tool around ESG. I think that would be perfect obviously for Hut8, because you guys are tuned in to that very issue. That's a pretty interesting aspect.
I think in general too, the theme that I love about all of this, whether you're looking at Bitcoin or Filecoin or io.net or the Helium network that was focused on decentralized phone radio bandwidth, all of it is focused around the theme of democratizing access, right?
Yep.
Like no longer is it going to be monopolies or oligopolies that decide who can and cannot use their technology or onboard to their platforms. This is a real movement towards democratization and empowering, the average person to have access to technology that they need in order to, continue to build and, innovate, which I really, really love about where all of this technology is going and what really Web3 is also about.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to get to a couple more details here before we jump out of here, Sue. I wanted to show a little bit about the CC data. This is kind of looking at the ESG benchmark. This was pretty recent data in terms of grades. And you guys, if you're not following this website, check it out because it gives you a kind of an overview of some of the blockchains that are out there from an environmental, impact, and you can kind of get a score. It's almost like a little mini ESG side of it. But when you look at the growth of where AI and decentralized compute is going to go, we were looking at a chart right here. This is NVIDIA's current market cap. There's Bitcoin right there, and then there's Hut8 right there, 3% right now in comparison to the size of what NVIDIA is doing. There is a lot of headway here for massive market explosion, I think, in this area of AI. Obviously, we'll see this around rendering and technologies used for that. I know you guys are all geared up for that, but what's kind of the runway or the, maybe some of the things you guys are starting to step into right now that would help you accelerate in that direction?
So I think certainly, as I mentioned, we did place an order, or US Bitcoin Corp did place an order for these GPUs, and we feel pretty good about our ability to start executing in near term on that side of things. Immediately post merger, we've got a little over 1 gigawatt of power under management, and a lot of that is supported by really a composable compute platform. So we're offering a breadth of different compute options with underneath that giant umbrella of power. And so I think that real uptick in our available power, I think is what's really interesting. And then also this managed services side of our business. So this is, again, as I mentioned earlier, like the CBRE, the JLL, it's like an end-to-end infrastructure energy management business line that's focused on partnering with renewable power players who want to use Bitcoin mining for load stabilization, or partnering with oil and gas producers who want to use Bitcoin mining to capture methane and mitigate methane that way. We don't think a lot of those providers are going to want to hire their own Bitcoin miner management teams in-house. And this is where this managed services business comes, because it also includes, managing the machines, setting everything up, the billing, the electron arbitrage. So those are some of the areas of our business that capitalize on some of these themes of greater renewable participation, methane mitigation, and also just the demand and growth of AI compute that I think is really going to be a killer app for Hut.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is one of the areas we're focusing in terms of just coverage. Even though it's still very early, I think this is it's one of those things that if you're watching what's happening in the market right now, and this is including whether it's projects like IONET or many others that are starting to move in this direction, blockchain is going to be one of the prevailing winds that will flow into what's happening in the space for AI. Hey, we did a little test here, and we wanted to see if we could render your image in AI. so we played around with it.
Glasses.
Yeah, so we've got you with some glasses here, and then we came up with this for your in. Yeah, I know, it looks great, right? I thought it was a pretty good render, and then we came up with this, which is we think this is your in-game asset.
Oh yeah, that chick's a badass. Oh yeah, nice. Yeah,
I thought you'd like that one. Anyway, if you guys want to check out, we'll send it to you. If you guys want to check out Hut8, go over and visit their website. You'll learn a little bit more about what Sue and her team is doing over there. Sue, it's been great having you on the show. Thanks again for stopping in today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon, guys. Bye.
All right, see ya. All right, listen, guys, if you're not in our Diamond Circle, make sure and jump in right now. It's one of the best places you can get additional alpha. We've got 2 additional podcasts over there that do not make their way here onto YouTube. Additional research, all sorts of coverage that we do over on PBN3. So it's very easy to get to. Click the link down below. If you guys want to catch me out there on X, it's at Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.